Hello everyone, James Williams, Director of Programs with MEF. So as Director of Programs, it's the messaging and the mobile payment side of things, which are really my two bags of tricks. And I'm very pleased to welcome now Mr. Patrick Flynn from Nettzer. Pat, hi.
James, how are you doing?
Oh, very good, thank you, very good. It's fair to say, Pat, that you've had a little bit of background in the world of messaging the past few years.
Yeah, so people who know me would probably know me more for messaging straight out of the famous Logica CMG stable back in the day, and I was co-founder of Open Mind Networks, which is still going, and I've worked with companies like Anam. So yeah, James, I met you back there then, and we're still at it, man.
I know. I love this session. It's pity we've only got 15 minutes together now. I'm looking at my clock here, 13 minutes going to 12 minutes together, which will go super fast. But this session on digital onboarding really rolls together everything that's come so far. We've had the session about SMS phishing in Brazil. We've heard that the Brazilian market is the worst for when it comes to SMS phishing. But we also heard from our keynote today, Gustavo from Ricardo, that the really important issue is trust in Brazil. So tell us about digital onboarding and how can that overcome this whole issue of trust, Pat? What can it do?
Yeah, well, James, as you're well aware, and everybody here, we probably all have digital bank accounts, such as in Europe, it'll be Revolut or N26. And I checked, for example, in the Brazilian market, it looks like there's about 7 neo banks or digital banks, and the vast majority of them will onboard using a mobile app. So to meet regulatory requirements and for the company, for the mobile operator or the bank to know who the customer is, you need to digitally onboard. And if you think about it, in the times of COVID, digital onboarding, digital channel has truly come of age. People are reluctant to go to retail outlets, or they may see an ad on TV, they want to respond straight away. So why not digitally on board? And that's what we're doing with mobile operators, to enable them to digitally onboard their customers, enable MVNOs to digitally onboard their customers. But also, once the identity of the customer is known, you have a high degree of trust, and you can allow enterprises. You can be an ID broker for enterprises and say, yes, that is James Williams, and he has a very dapper shirt and jacket on, and he's probably, maybe you could talk to him about buying some new suit or something. So yes.
I don't have many suits that actually match top and bottom, so perhaps I've got many jackets like this. I think I've had 3 changes today already. But yeah, no, that's absolutely correct. Now, fraud is a massive thing in Brazil. The companies there lose over $40 billion a year in terms of fraud. But where does regulation sit in Brazil? Because I know the last time I was there was 20 years ago personally. And I saw it was really highly regulated then. And if we're talking about mobile operators, for example, you've got to split marketing and transactional traffic in Brazil. And when it comes to actually identification, what they call the Registro Geral, the general registry, each citizen has a different RG document in each state. So how do companies like Nettzer get it across to regulators and indeed countries like Brazil that, hang on a second, you've got to make things a little bit easier for digital onboarding to really establish that trust?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question, James. And any operator you work with, they all work under different regimes. So there's always some difference. And there's also what you might call legacy issues, where the regulator is still thinking in terms of faxed documents or retail outlets. Operators can work with regulators, but increasingly the regulators are accepting that a digitally proven identity is as strong as required to meet the regulatory approval. Most, particularly government IDs, are getting quite sophisticated in terms of the security features. You're seeing things like QR codes embedded, which are protected by PKI but the public key allows you to read the QR code and check back with the government database that that document is in fact valid. And the journey is very simple, to be honest. Generally speaking, it would be a question of taking a picture of yourself, taking a picture of your ID document. I'm oversimplifying here. They're loaded to the cloud and they're checked, but there's a lot of security checks, eKYC checks that go on in the background, including checking with government databases where that's allowed. So we get levels like 99% levels of confidence that customer is who they say they are. One of the biggest advantages, though, James, is the cost. The cost is at least 10% of the existing retail onboarding costs. So it's a huge difference in cost for the operator, apart from it's 24/7, anytime, anywhere onboarding.
Fantastic. So I take it your solution, your Nettzer solution, it's in play with several operators. I know. Any you can mention at all or not?
Well, we're working. I prefer not to actually say, to be honest, but we are working with an operator in the South American region. And if you know anything about Ireland, you'd probably guess who it is, shall we say. We've had a huge take-up in the Middle East, which is really interesting. In Europe, it's a bit slower, and I think it's the regulatory environment is a bit slower. But we're definitely going to see in the future where you would have an operator would have multiple channels, such as retail, web, but a true digital channel on the mobile is where the next development is, and it's by far going to become the most popular channel to recruit new customers. Every operator has an app now for customer care. It's just a question of adding onboarding to that app.
I think we also got the question of culture that comes into play, because we saw with Phil Todd, the analyst who created that smartphone app-related report for Brazil, that you've got great smartphone penetration in Brazil, but then also juxtaposed with that, we've got the fact that cash is still really, really king. Even with COVID having come into play, cash is still heavily used. So it's a tough one. There is no blueprint. There is no guaranteed silver bullet for getting this right and executing it perfectly, isn't there?
No, I mean, inevitably we know where the world's going to go, and I mean, I'm always a great guy for dealing with cash, but now I never have any cash in my wallet, and our habits do change over time, and particularly, as I say, I think COVID's been an accelerator of digital transformation. We all recognize that, but really, once you have an identification for the customer, you have a high degree of trust that you can, be sure that your contracts. I know Brazil is probably 90% prepaid, and also, there's the four big operators there are jostling for position and competing with each other to maintain position. So it's the market has its own characteristics, and I'm pretty confident though that, particularly say with the success of the digital banks in Brazil, you're going to see these digital channels being implemented by Brazilian operators over the next few years. Yeah, absolutely. And have you seen with your client base at the moment that the fact that they have digital onboarding, they've implemented that in itself, it smooths the customer experience. It makes the onboarding much, much easier, and it helps with customer satisfaction ultimately. Have you seen that as a result? Yeah, and James, what's even more interesting, and this sort of surprised me, was you can digitally onboard, but sometimes there's a legal requirement for a paper document to be exchanged. And the operators are actually, I said, well, look, will this be a problem? And the operators say, no, it's great. So once somebody is digitally onboarded, they still have to provide a paper document in some markets. The fact is that they're committed to the purchase process. They've already bought in, they've engaged, they've done 80% of what's required. So, and this is just strange, I just found is that they had to actually show some paper document for regulatory reasons. And the operators still see the digital channel as the channel of the future. So it was what we call hybrid onboarding, where the big advantage, while we talk in terms of costs and regulatory issues, it's actually the intent of the customer to change to you as an operator. And that can happen anytime, anywhere. So if the customer goes home in the evening, he sees a TV promotion, $10 a month or €10 or whatever the equivalent is, they can engage straight away and start the onboarding process. So it's actually the best thing to think of the digital channel is it's an acquiring channel. And it's not just for the purpose of document or KYC approval. It's much bigger than just that. It actually gives a call to action for customers to respond to marketing or sales.
That's fun. No, that's a really, really good point. I actually wouldn't have thought of that either, because I would have thought, hang on a second, if you've got to, it's a bit of a weird one, that, because if you've got to show a piece of paper anyway, then why would you bother initiating that digital route?
Well, this is what, to be honest, this is what I looked the most surprised here between the two of us, because when we started talking to operators, they said, no, this is really important. Once they've downloaded the app, they've engaged, they've bought into the offer we've made, and we have captured their details, and we have legally onboarded them. But the regulator said we have to show this document. We still love it. We still have to go.
It's a mindset thing, clearly. Then, so from the operator's perspective, they can show the prospective client, they're doing everything they can to make the move seamless. But hey, hang on a second, we've got this regulation to contend with. That's not down to us. So they've got the technology in place that at some point, hopefully, regulation will catch up with the technology available, and all the solutions many MEF members and indeed other companies have in play to verify someone's identity and indeed credentials. So,
it's amazing. And actually, you can see they are talking to the operators, the operators are talking to the regulators about, well, look, do you really need to show that piece of paper? And it's just typical government departments. It takes a while for things to change. But even that hybrid model, operators are seeing that as a customer capture, it's a customer engagement process has already started. I don't know about you, but last time I went to a retail shop over some complicated thing, I was there 30 minutes just waiting to get to the counter. And, if you can cut out all the extra work and there's a very quick, here's my picture, whatever it is, that's fine.
Totally. 100%. Pat, we are actually very, very close to ending the session in the next 60 seconds or so. So any closing remarks out there for mobile operators in Brazil and indeed anywhere in the world that have not embraced digital onboarding? What would you say to them? Yeah,
well, it's happening, guys, and you're smart people. I think you'll realize that this is the way of the future. So, there's ourselves and other companies do this, and we'd be delighted to talk to you. But most of all, I guess one thing I'll say, James, most people probably don't know. I know something about you most people don't know, and that is you're actually a personal trainer. And I'd have to say that that really surprised me. And if the MEF career doesn't work out, James, I highly recommend you as a personal trainer for anybody who wants to
I can do that, Pat. I'm going to end this by a shameless plug for MEF's personal digital and personal data, should I say, and digital identity working group that covers many, many issues we've talked about today, number one. And secondly, a very funny thing, earlier in the week, I was actually asked on another working group, do you have legs? So I actually stood up to prove, yes, I do have legs. Because for best part of 9 months, all anyone has seen is this, what you're seeing. Anyway, Pat, thank you very much for joining me from Dublin, I think you're in today.
Dublin, yeah.
Dublin. All the best. Thank you.
All the best, James. Thank you.
Bye.